Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to Simplilearn. We're honored to have you join us today to Supporting Innovation with Agile with your host, Shri Krishna Joshi. Oh, I hope I'm saying that right. Shri Krishna Joshi. My name is Richard, and after this intro, I'll be mostly in the background helping Krishna so that everything goes smooth. And then at the end, I'll come back up for the 15-minute question and answer. Agile. In today's world in project management, this is one of the biggest buzzwords out there, Agile, both for having a successful business and for a successful career. If you do not know Krishna, Krishna is Director Software Engineer at Pegasystems Worldwide India PVT Ltd. And has over a decade experience working with companies in Agile environment, including to help building new teams and new companies going from 0 to 100 million in less than 2 years. If you've ever worked with a startup company, that's impressive. Startup companies have about an 80% fail rate, and very few make it to 100 million. Very impressive. He's always reaching to exceed levels of excellence and quality. Over the years, has certified in everything Agile and Scrum. I had a list, and I was going to go down it, but that would take about 5 minutes. Great person to ask questions. If you have training questions for your company or as an individual for your own career path, he's an accomplished expert in the field with hands-on, and this is a great place to ask those questions. For those who aren't familiar with the webinar, I want to introduce you to your dashboard. We have everybody on mute because we can't have all the background mute sounds and everything going. So go ahead and use that question module to ask your questions. If it's minimized, you can click on the red arrow to maximize it again. And if you can go ahead and just say hi, go ahead and say hi to Krishna, let him know you're excited to be here. This also gives us a chance to check our sound system, make sure it's working. And hi Joshi, Mark, great to have you. Excellent, glad to have you guys here. Excited to have everybody here. Hello, Krishna from Neelam. Thank you, Neelam. So yeah, make this as your best friend. As you're going through the thing and you come up with questions, you can post them here. Generally, we save them for the end, at the last 15 minutes. Sometimes I do interrupt if it's appropriate or if I'm able to. And sometimes he answers the questions during the session. If you hear something awesome, brilliant, interesting, insightful, and you want to share it in your social channel, whatever your social channels are, Facebook, LinkedIn, tweet, you can use the hashtag SLWebinars. That way people can find it and you'll make them wish they were here. You didn't come here to listen to me. I'm proud to introduce Krishna, who will be your host for Supporting Innovation with Agile. Go ahead, sit back, relax, have a cup of coffee, tea, or if it's evening where you're at, maybe a glass of wine. Kick back and enjoy. It's an honor for me to hand this over. Hello, Krishna. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Richard. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Excellent. Right. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and let you take it over.
Yeah, you just mentioned wine, and I have moods changing, so I hope I can keep up, right? But thank you for the introduction. Thank you very much, and hello, everybody. Like Richard mentioned, my name is Krishna, and I'm a passionate Agile coach, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all on this learning channel. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we will go over how Agile is fueling innovation, and these tend to be the most common buzzwords these days. So we can go over those. And given that Richard has already given my introduction, I'll just skip this part and jump right into the agenda. So I'm sure most of you here must have heard about both of these buzzwords that have been doing the rounds for close to a decade now, at least a decade. When I think there's been a lot of emphasis on innovation. So. Over the next 45 minutes, we will go over these 4 areas in this webinar. A traditional versus the Agile project management. We'll go over innovation and how the values for innovating and the ideology has already been embedded about 16 years ago when the Agile Manifesto came into being back in 2001. We'll also talk about how we embrace and manage change in the requirements as a result of market dynamics or competition, what have you. And we'll also, towards the end, look at, how continuous improvement slash Kaizen is built into Agile, right? So without further ado, let's jump straight in. And, just so that we're all on the same page, and for some of you who are, starting new with Agile, um, and are getting to hear these buzzwords quite a bit, let's level set everybody, and let's have a common understanding of what these two buzzwords actually mean. So innovation, if you look up on Google or the dictionary, it comes from the Latin word. It's called innovare, and that means to renew or to change, right? And agility, if you will, or agile, is the ability to embrace change quickly and easily, right? So, if you can embrace change easily, if you can basically react fast to the changing requirements or market dynamics, and come out with something that delivers value, that is perceived as innovation. And as you can see on the screen, innovation is obviously a state of mind. Where whenever you want to introduce a change, then you want to do it innovatively so you deliver maximum value. And on the bottom left, well, what you see is plan, do, check, act. So Agile, as you know, is a iterative and incremental method for software development. And as the picture shows, this Deming cycle demonstrates how the ability to change is built in to the agile methods that we're gonna explore a little more today, right? Um, now, what we want to know is answer the question as to why we should all be interested in trying to understand this concept. And I have a few personas here, so that you can relate to one or more of these, depending on what your background is and who you are. Agile and innovation. You could be this little guy here, who's a manager, who's trying to basically, improve quality, increase the employee morale, or basically improve, productivity. You could be an entrepreneur, like the Steve Jobs negative that's shown up here. Entrepreneur who's focusing on a faster time to market, right? And that's all these entrepreneurs slash startup companies want today, is to basically be able to hit the market faster, acquire the get into doing some amount of market acquisition for whatever field you are in, and then cash in and start to continuously deliver value. You could be an innovation team or a part of an innovation team who's trying to understand what are the best tools and techniques, or what are the best methods to basically drive innovation by adopting agile methodologies, right? So there's something for everybody in the audience. You may fit into one or more of these user personas, as I said. So we'll try and explore that a little bit. So now the big question, continuing the big question, and trying to answer this question is, why should somebody follow and embrace an agile method, which in turn fuels innovation? There are case studies, and this is not me saying. All of this information is freely available on the internet if you want to go ahead and look up. There's close to about 1,000 organizations that have been surveyed, and these surveys do happen almost every year, to try and figure out the benefits that agile organizations are deriving by embracing agile methodologies. They tend to be far more innovative, as a result of which they, in terms of processes, in terms of products, what have you, and hence they engage better with their customers. These are the organizations that have been surveyed whose quality levels have improved by over 50%, their productivities, employee productivity has gone up anywhere between 20 to 50%. They have far more happier and motivated employees, and their time to market is now 30 to 75% faster, right? And we have a range here which indicates that not all organizations get the same kind of benefit. It's kind of varying. And you can look up multiple case studies, on scaleagileparamework.com/case studies as well, if you want to see, how organizations have, developed a culture of innovation by, embracing and adopting the agile methodologies. I'd also like to, introduce to you one of these case studies that I came across, and this is published by the Forbes, Forbes Business Review. And according to Forbes in 2006, I'll name the company because this is, one of these most popular company, or one of the most popular companies in the world. And this is a company which is gaining the Great Places to Work ranking #1, for the past decade. And some of you may have already guessed it. This is Salesforce.com. And because they were, honest, they came out and published their results. We already know this. You guys can look it up on Google as well. You will find it. Back in 2006, Salesforce leadership came to realize that their innovation was coming to a halt. And with just one product release in 2006, Salesforce were very disappointed. Obviously, because in the previous 5 years, they were delivering an average of at least 4 major releases each year, right? So due to this, the software company decided that, they wanted to change the management style to focus and become far more customer-driven, right? And be much more collaborative with the customers in basically being far more outcome-oriented and having an iterative management practice. And that is what we know today as, Agile, so which is what is doing wonders for Salesforce.com. And this is not just qualitative wonders. And I'll also share a few numbers that are published and available on the net, if that's enough motivation for all of us to understand and embrace Agile. Mike Cohn, who's also a very very noteworthy author in the world of Agile, published that in the first year of Salesforce making the switch from traditional to agile methods, Salesforce.com released 94% more features. Right? That's speaking of the productivity that we see up here. And speaking of individual productivity, Salesforce.com also was able to measure productivity of teams/individuals, but on an average, every individual's productivity grew by 38% because Agile was giving them the windows of opportunity to stop and innovate at regular time intervals, right? So that's huge, right? So 94% more features delivered, 38% more features per developer, and overall, when they surveyed their customers, they were able to figure out that they were delivering 500% more value to the customers. And speaking of employee engagement, that year, the employee satisfaction survey, or the GPTW survey that I spoke about, which is a Great Places to Work survey, 92% of employees said that they would very strongly recommend, or basically refer a friend or a colleague to work for this company. And then they would very strongly do so because of the agile approach that was helping create self-organizing and self-empowered teams that Salesforce was able to build over time. Right? I thought this case study is so important because we all know about this giant, and I think that's a fantastic story to draw inspiration from and try and understand, dig a little deeper into how Salesforce tried to do it. Right? So that said, moving on, I wanted to also, introduce to you, or basically give us a refresher, or bring to your notice the specific areas in the Agile Manifesto And that basically proves that innovation or the ability to embrace change was inherently built into the Agile Manifesto when it was created. So the ideology or the values are very strong proponents or supporters of Agile/innovation. Right, so most of you may already be familiar with these, Agile values. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change, right? Which is your ability to embrace change is what makes you innovative over following a plan. While these are the agile values, you will all agree that there's about 12 principles, 12 agile principles. Two of those agile principles very strongly, do mention the need to embrace changing requirements depending on the market conditions, depending on the provider's circumstances, skill sets, what have you. The principle number 2 says, welcome changing requirements, be agile, right? Embrace change and find out innovative ways to embrace those changing requirements, even if it's late in development, right? Agile processes harness change for customers' competitive advantage. So it's all about embracing the changes to deliver value which is in the best interest of the customer. At the same time, there's principle number 12, which speaks about the need for us to inspect and adapt at regular intervals, right? And adapt basically again is to change depending on how the competitors are making a move, what will give us the market differentiators, and how the market is changing, how technology is changing, and things like that. If we pick up, if we sign up for software projects and don't visit or basically, don't have these intervals to frequently inspect and adapt, we will only be meeting the customer a year later by when both the market conditions, the technology, and the customer environment would have changed. Not hence, we will that way miss out on the opportunity to be more agile, more collaborative, and deliver to the customer what they really want, right? Now that's the Agile Manifesto. Let's also throw a little bit more light on why the traditional software development methodology did not have this room to basically innovate or be more agile. So requirement management, as we all understand, in the conventional methodology used to be to have a requirement gathering phase in the very beginning, and we would only say that we would only say that this phase is complete after we've fully understood what it is that the customer wants, or what it is that we think that the customer wants, which means that we do a very exhaustive process of gathering requirements from the customer. We try and define everything up front, and we start, that becomes our starting point, and then we go away and then build the software in a cave, if you will, right? And the customer never gets to see it till we are done. Now that is no longer acceptable, right? I mean, this may be acceptable in the real estate industry, right? Where, requirements don't change so very often. We don't go back to the builder and say, you've basically, shown us a plan in which here's a kitchen and here's a bedroom. Can you swap it midway? You don't do that, or we don't do that often, right? We don't do that, conventionally. If you're booking a flat or what have you, you don't do that at all. If you speak of, a slightly different example, the average age of an aircraft for domestic airways in the United States is about 17 years, right? That means that the physical body or projects like those which require, physical labor or machines, they don't change so often. If you speak of the knowledge workforce or software, think of how often the same aircraft's technology or technology to interact between the cockpit and the ground staff, and the cockpit and the airport staff, how frequently does that change and send out alerts on the various zillion apps that we have which give us flight related information. So that all of that does change though, right? So so conventional projects are or conventional methodology is still good when the requirements are rock solid and they do not change, right? As opposed to that, in Agile, only high-level product backlog is basically frozen upon in upfront, and then the backlog is progressively elaborated or progressively constructed as we make progress, right? And the planning approach, I think it stems from the fact that there's, if it's waterfall, then there's heavy emphasis on heavy upfront planning. As opposed to that, agile methodologies have rolling wave planning, which means that you basically plan, do, check, act, do take a stock of the situation and then plan for the next iteration. So you just plan for one iteration at a time, and an iteration, give or take, is anywhere between 1 to 4 weeks at the max. The most common iteration length is about 2 weeks in agile software development. You do not make all the decisions in the beginning of the release, right? Because either the market conditions could change, your competitor's scenario could change, or your ability to deliver could change, one of these. So you don't make all of those decisions. You try and focus on the highest priority items first and deliver those, and then after every 2 weeks you inspect and adapt and then take up the next set of requirements, right? So similarly, scope is something that you don't tightly control in Agile, as opposed to waterfall, where the whole control mechanism is around scope. The moment the customer says, I have a changed requirement or I changed my mind, we basically go back to them with a change request and put them through the change control board, which is very torturous. So, which is not in the best interest of the customer anyways. So we work in favor of the customer and say that in the 2 weeks window, when the sprint is in flight, we do not change the scope, but we can change that at the end, at every sprint boundary. Right? And the project management approach is predominantly focused on cost and schedules, whereas the project management approach in Agile is to be flexible and embrace change in requirements to satisfy the business need. Right? Now that we've spoken about that, I also wanted to bring introduce to you the Agile framework or the workflow, if you will, and also firstly walk you through the process real quick, and also show you opportunities where we can embrace change / where we can innovate, right? So like every project, this project also starts with the product owner getting us a prioritized or a ranked list of backlog items that are basically taken up to plan for the upcoming sprint. We only would take up, as if you can see the color combinations, the color patterns, only the ones that are in orange are picked up, which means that the top priority items go in the first sprint, and so on and so forth. So we work in order of priority. The team basically picks up whatever they think they can consume and deliver in 2 weeks, and plan for it, break it down into tasks, estimate it, and then whatever can be delivered at the end of 2 weeks, a 2-week iteration, the team basically commits to it. And then every single day, the team basically meets for something called the daily scrum or the stand-up meeting, right? And all through these 2 weeks, the team is doing continuous, the team is trying to be, living up to the key agile tenets, which is to be transparent, transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So the team tries to live up to these key tenets of Agile. Transparency, by trying to showcase progress through burn down charts, Kanban boards, if you will. Inspection is by, doing peer reviews. It could be by doing QA reviews. It could be by doing sprint reviews, or it could be mid-sprint reviews as well, right? And adaptation is obviously opportunities to change the way we do work, or change the scope of work itself. And those opportunities are also available daily, hourly, or for that matter, definitely available during the sprint retrospective, where we also would be reviewing how much we got done and why we didn't get done as much as we thought we would, if we will. Now, having said that, let's look at where are now the opportunities to basically introduce change. Now, the first opportunity is right here before we start the sprint. If the product owner figures that something that has been discovered very recently needs to be shifted up in priority, booted up. Let's assume that user story 3 in the first sprint was only half done, or there were a few bugs found that need to be fixed. However, it turns out we have a funding meeting coming up in like the next 2 weeks, and we absolutely must take up story number 6 and showcase that to the angel investor. So 1, 2, along with 6 will probably make up the perfect set of features or use cases to showcase to this investor. So in which case, 3, which is kind of half done, or for that matter, you're not fully done, will basically take the back seat. It basically goes down in priority. It sits in the backlog, and 6 gets item number 6 gets pulled up. So in the next sprint, we would possibly start working with item number 6 and 5, or maybe you just focus on getting 6 done first, because 1, 2, and 6 will basically make the perfect recipe for us to showcase use cases. So product backlog, shuffling, prioritizing, ranking, which is the primary deliverable from the product owner. This is one opportunity for us to introduce that change and be innovative, right? Be innovative in the best interest of the business. If we don't get the venture capitalist funding, we'll probably no longer have the money to sustain and stay in business. We also have the opportunity in the sprint planning meeting. If somebody figures that taking up a specific story at this stage, will have a lot of vulnerability or has a dependency on a different team delivering something else, we can negotiate with the product owner to see if something can be pushed to a later stage, or if something else can be advanced in lieu of that. So that's another opportunity to be smart and be innovative. Number 3 is what you see here. Every single day we get to know as to what was done yesterday, what's the plan for the next 24 hours, and if there's any impediments coming in the way of delivering value. And once we know the impediments that are blocking the top stories, let's say there's 3 individuals, or let's say there's 10 individuals. The first couple of individuals are working on the top priority story, and they are stuck. They are stuck because either they don't have the skill, or they don't have the, they underestimated a specific story, or what have you. They are at risk of delivering that story in time, so that either a different team can consume it, or either because we have to show that to the angel investor. In which case, guys who are working on other low priority stories, it could be person number 5 or 6 or 7 in the team, they will know in the stand-up, and they will switch gears, or they should discuss and switch gears and say, hey, I'm working on a low priority story. You're working on a higher priority story. I think I have the background and the experience to be able to help. Would is there an opportunity that I can join you guys? And then they figure out whatever works best to ensure that the highest priority story gets delivered well in time. So depending on what the impediments are and what the highest priorities or commitments are for that sprint. Number 4 is obviously sprint review meeting, where the team basically will showcase the work that they did, or show and tell the work that they did in the last 2 weeks, right? depending on the feedback that they get, either from the quality architect, or it could be the product owner. Depending on the feedback that they get, they would obviously be able to change or basically adapt in how they take a specific functional or a technical approach in the upcoming sprint on similar stories. Now, that's a sprint review, and needless to say, there are some teams who don't wait till the end of the sprint to show stories to their product owner. There are teams who do either mid-sprint reviews, or if there are teams that are even more fortunate that have a local product owner, they show and tell the stories that are complete every couple of days. Or if it's a remote product owner, then they would do a screen share and show that. And for which this is where we need an extremely supportive and engaging and a committed product owner for the team. Sprint retrospective, while the sprint review will tell us, give us a quantitative reflection and also feedback from product owners on how we should change the functionality or technology, or basically to change our approach. The sprint retrospective is a process or a qualitative feedback which tells us what should change in the process, right? And so that's where we discuss what's going well, what isn't going well, what's a propeller, what's a derailer, and what are some things that we should continue to do. So those are these 5 are clearly opportunities for us to stop and reflect, or pause and reflect on what we could do differently to achieve and deliver greater value. Right? That said, every time we say that we have to manage, embrace change, and basically embrace change to ensure that we're working in the best interest of the customer, this is a clear trade-off, and so should it. Now, as you can see from the picture, if one of these pebbles is, if this is the amount of value that we're expected to deliver, if you basically take off one of these, there's an imbalance, right? So there'll either be a perception that we didn't deliver enough value, or so to basically mitigate to that and to continue to create that balance, we can only take up something else if a product owner asks us to change this specific requirement. We could replace it, once the sprint is in flight, we could only replace it if we have something else that's tantamount, which is, the estimate for, the other story is equal to the story that it's being replaced with. Otherwise, it obviously creates an imbalance on either the customer's end or at the supplier's end, right? So, whenever somebody says, at the same time, you can't have something lighter. You could possibly have 2 stories which are, let's say, half the size of this one to replace this one with. At the same time, you cannot have something heavier than this pebble or this stone that you're replacing it with. Means that you're trying to take on much more, and that's not sustainable pace, right? How do you embrace change? So another illustration shown here basically shows us how if this whole thing is a product backlog, how do we embrace change? If there's a story, let's say 1, 2, 3, the 4th one in the sequence, rank number 4, if that is to be replaced, then it needs to be replaced with something else of equal size and of pretty much the equal size, so the team doesn't have to work overtime or is underutilized, and even the customer or the voice of the customer, who's the product owner, does not perceive that the team is delivering much less value than what they're capable of, right? So that's one thing. We could do that. At the same time, if there are stories that need to be reprioritized, to embrace change, to ensure, market conditions could have changed. This story could have gained momentum, or the customer, or the product management, or the business advisory council may want to see this story ahead of this one. So we might just switch those priorities. To give you an example, if we're building an e-commerce site, there's obviously functionalities like login that we need to create. There's obviously functionalities like payment gateway, and a few product lines that need to be added, right? there could be instances when somebody's trying to introduce a discount coupon code and say, hey, you know what? If you want to basically, this may be a good feature to have, but that cannot take priority over things like having a shopping cart or having a login screen or having a user profile, right? At the same time, if there's a way to introduce a search functionality ahead of anything else, then we might resequence it, and so on and so forth. So this resequencing can happen depending on while the product owner is the one who's spending his 50% of his time with the team in trying to clarify requirements and then accept stories and and so on and so forth. The other 50% of the time, the product owner is meeting with either industry principals, customer advisory boards, or customers themselves, and doing multiple interviews to understand, what it is that they're looking for in terms of requirements in the, next 2 or 3 or 4 sprints from that point. What's highest priority for them and basically trying to play those scenarios in mind, trying to comprehend those, doing those, taking help from the user experience guys in trying to do wireframes, arrive at wireframes to ensure and basically validate that the customer's expectations and our understanding of those expectations are the same. And once we understand those better, and if we had originally had a list, and during a successive customer conversation, if the rank of that list has to change, the product owner would very well do that to ensure that we're innovative in trying to capture and deliver the item of the highest value first, right ahead of our competition, or basically, in the best interest of our customer. Similarly, there could also be items which do not, which are kind of, wishful items. So these could be, discount functionality or applying discount coupons or what have you. These were originally in scope, and we only had a single line item to say introduce the discount functionality or features in the e-commerce portal. We had not gotten into details to basically get the granular levels to figure out what should be the impact of applying a discount code, how should the validation algorithm work, how should the totals change, should we show that in the totals, should we also update the customer profile to show the total number of discounts that he has basically benefited from since the time we introduced this discount functionality, and so on and so forth. So we haven't discussed those details, or we haven't ironed those out. So at some stage, if we have the time, then we would basically refine these items, these big items, break them down into smaller, meaningful chunks, and add more detail. There could also be items which no longer make sense for you to work on, right? So we have other better things to do, so we just delete these items as well. So this is just an illustration of how we embrace change and manage the changing requirements, depending on A, both whether we are ready or not, and B, how the market conditions are changing, market dynamics, competitor dynamics are changing, or technology is changing. So we could basically be agile by changing our priorities to be in accordance with the business and the business interest. Now that said, if we are constantly focused on trying to get done with everything that's shown up in the backlog, so we always have something that's on top of the list. And if you're always focused on, we're laser focused on working on the highest priority item all the time, then how do we find the time to do product innovation, right? And so, obviously, while there are opportunities built in to the Scrum and Agile framework, there are organizations who want to do product innovation, and they follow one of these. So the Scaled Agile framework recommends something called the IP sprint, which is after every 4 sprints, there's an innovation and a planning sprint for the upcoming sprint. So that could be, a window set out and some time window reserved exclusively to come up with innovative ideas and such, and plan for the upcoming release. There's also organizations that are doing hackathons that we see from time to time. Amazon does a lot of this, Salesforce does this, and so on and so forth, to try and encourage individuals within the organizations to come up with really, really cool ideas that can be productized. Obviously, it's a win-win. The company benefits from these cool ideas, and also the developers get the sense that they were able to contribute to a piece of the product. So that gives them the satisfaction. There's also innovation days, or some organizations call it shippy days. And these are days when we're given about 24 hours of window, just like hackathons, and we are expected to not just present the idea, but we're also expected to basically show a working prototype that can work and can be scaled up, if need be. We just publish a day, pick a day in the month and say, here's an innovation day, and here's the time window. Some organizations say that you just have a few hours, some say you have 24 hours, but that day we won't talk about mainstream work, but we will try and think outside the box and then come up with innovative ideas. And like I said, at a minimum, the best opportunity for us to invest in these innovation days, hackathons, shippy days, or what have you, is done at the end of a release or just before a new release begins, right? And that is when we're not working really, really crazy, trying to worry about either the upcoming sprint's deliverable or the hardening index or what have you, or anything else unpredictable. So at the end of the sprint, individuals are given like a full day to basically sit and think through what it is that they would like to deliver within a day, and then they do that. So in summary, there are obviously we understood what innovation is and what Agile is. You could be one of these personas who's trying to understand how innovation will benefit you, and we also saw a few statistics, industry-wide statistics, on how agility is fueling innovation and how organizations are able to get these tangible benefits. We heard about the Salesforce case study. We also went over the Agile Manifesto and the Agile Scrum framework to figure out how and where there are windows of opportunities that are built into the framework that give us the opportunity to innovate. And we also said, how do we master the art of embracing the changing requirements? And in either the product backlog prioritization or trading off requirements, or for that matter, how else do we find the time to innovate when we're constantly focused on the top priority items and there's always more than one? How do we take the time out to innovate? A lot of organizations are trending towards innovation days, hackathons, or there are some organizations that dedicate at least, like, there are some organizations that take it to the extreme. They have innovation weeks, so they have a full week of innovation work happening only. So that's something else that organizations are coming up with. So I hope you found this useful. And I've been doing all the talk, and so I wanted to basically pause here for a bit. Thank you all for taking the opportunity, taking the time to come in and listen in, and tuning in to understand how Agile is fueling innovation, and also getting a few insights. Hopefully this was useful. You were able to take a few insights. So that said, I'll pause here and see if there's any questions that we could take from you, and provide responses that might be of help.
Excellent, Krishna. And Krishna, thank you for being here today. I appreciate I always learn new stuff on these webinars, even though I'm in the back listening to them over and over again, and there's always something new and insightful. It amazes me.
Awesome.
As far as my own life course and career that I'm on, the paths I'm on. Again,
Great.
great place to ask specific questions because we do have an expert here. I don't know if you caught the beginning, but he's worked with small companies all the way to large companies. So he has a pretty wide range of information and knowledge. I'll take the first question. I'm going to take myself because it's one we always get, and I've seen a couple people have asked it. Will we be sharing the presentation to participants at the end? And the answer is yes, we do record all the different sessions. If you go to simplilearn.com and go under support, you just request and they'll send you a copy or a link to the copy. It does take up to 24 hours because they look at it and they make sure it actually comes through okay and nothing's messed up. While we get into questions, I'm going to hand over to our expert, Krishna, and we do have a lot coming in, which is exciting. I do have a poll that I launch, so I'll take over the screen here, and then we'll start going through some of the questions.
Sure.
And let me go. We have so many questions, it's hard to pick which ones are to jump into. And then there's an interesting question. This is kind of important because it deals with a lot of the whole setup. Can you link Scrum to Agile in short? Because we have Scrum, we have Agile, we have Waterfall, we have IT, I can't think of it. IL, thank you. There's a lot of different little acronyms we're throwing around and words we're throwing in. Can you kind of do an overview of how those all fit together?
Sure, certainly. I'll be happy to. Thank you for the question. So Agile, if you were to imagine Agile, look at this as an umbrella, right? And Scrum is, one of the spokes of the umbrella. There's other methods which are other spokes in the Agile umbrella. Like there's XP, which is extreme programming. There is Lean, there is Kanban, there is Crystal, there is A-Turn or DSDM. That said, the most popular software development method is Scrum. There's about 68% of the organizations that say that they're following Agile are actually following Scrum or a combination of Scrum and XP. You could choose from any of these methods, but given that the success rate of projects that follow Scrum, and there's a survey that a company called Version 1 does every year, and they say, are you following Agile? And if yes, then what's been the success rate and so on and so forth. So there's close to about 70% of the projects that follow Scrum in software development are successful, and that's and hence the popularity of Scrum. So Agile, like I said, is an umbrella of methods. Scrum is the most popular one for new software development. Kanban is the most popular one for flow-based systems, so production support kind of an environment. So I hope that answers the question. There's
Excellent. Yeah, no, I thought that was really good because it's. I know I get confused because I'm working with a lot of different areas. I myself am not a Scrum Master, although I work with a lot of small companies and end up in that particular role, even though I don't ask for it. Let's see. Some of the questions, it's kind of hard to go through them and loop them all together sometimes. What is the role of the Scrum Master? In the last slide, there was a question, well, actually, a few slides ago. What is the specific role of the Scrum Master?
Okay, all right, fantastic question. So the Scrum Master, I think, in a nutshell, it has two very important roles. A, it is to be the process coach for the team, and B, it is to be the person who's clearing impediments that the team reports, either daily or what have you. So process coach, when I say process coach, this person has to basically be the master of the Scrum process in basically trying to keep up the time boxes. This may seem like a very, very simple activity to do, but this is an art and science as well. For instance, the daily stand-up. People, need to ensure that they respect the time box and they finish the stand-up in 15 minutes. Similarly, there could be a retrospective sprint review and stuff like that. While everybody in the team obviously, in all likelihood knows what ceremonies are to be planned in a sprint, it is a Scrum Master who has to give the team the heartbeat, the rhythm, or the cadence to give them the predictability. And how does that help? The Scrum Master should basically send out invites for the stand-up for the whole release. So everybody knows that daily Scrum happens at 10:30, for instance, at this place and at this time. So that way, everybody basically works towards that sync-up meeting, and everybody feels responsible and accountable that they need to come in and give their updates during that meeting. The Scrum Master at the beginning of the release can also determine and basically set the team's routine. How do you do that? Invites for the daily stand-up are gone. The Scrum Master also knows that the team has a sprint planning meeting, on the last day of every sprint. So that could be basically, sent out in advance. Sprint reviews, happen, on the last day of the sprint as well. Those invites go out. Sprint retrospectives happen, after the sprint reviews happen. So that can go out. What does this do? It helps everybody understand that the deadlines are serious. They don't move. They start respecting the time box. That's one thing. Secondly, if there are any logistical, travel-related things that need to be planned out to say the key individuals like the product owner or the architect, if they need to travel to wherever the majority of the team is, then they will plan their visits to be timed in line with the release planning and such. So once you give the team, kind of an outline of how their life will look every 2 weeks, there's that amount of predictability. And this is something that the Scrum Master should be, doing, and every day in and day out should be navigating to the other stakeholders to ensure that he gets to clear the impediments that the team report from time to time. So A, process coach, again in summary, A, process coach, and B, servant leader who helps to clear the team's impediments, right? Servant leadership is the facilitation that I spoke about of all of the Scrum ceremonies. So hopefully that answers the question that just got asked.
Excellent. And let's see. I'm going to have to try to skip around between a couple different areas because we have a lot of different variation on some of the questions. Let's look a little bit at the certifications. We have people who are probably at the beginning of their career, the beginning of Agile, who are asking, well, which one is more accepted, ASM or CSM? Or Simplilearn offers ASF and ASM. Which direction is more accepted in the industry? As far as, do you have suggestions as far as people who are looking for different certifications and what direction they should go in on that?
Sure, certainly. So, and this is a question that comes up, every single time we do a class or we do a webinar, and this is a very interesting one. So, now, number one, the kind of certification you do will actually which certification should you choose actually depends on what you want to get out of it. Scrum or the CSM focuses on, and I'm very glad somebody already asked this question about Scrum versus Agile. So Scrum or the Certified Scrum Master course is for organizations that are already following Scrum and is a really relatively small organization that only wants to focus on Scrum, right? The Certified Scrum Master certification focuses on just the Scrum method. However, the other methods like the PMI ACP or the Agile Scrum Master courses focus on the Agile umbrella. They not just focus on Agile and Scrum, of course they do. They will also focus on areas like DevOps, which is and very very concurrent, right? DevOps as a upcoming mainstream function, ITIL or ITSM. How do organizations work that have all of these being used in different parts of the organization? One part of the organization, let's say the support team is following Kanban, and the development team is following Scrum, and so on and so forth. If somebody wants to get a good appreciation of the different kinds of frameworks and how an amalgamation of these, or how the handshake happens between key roles of Scrum and Kanban and Lean and such, then the comprehensive courses like the PMI ACP or the Agile Scrum Master by Exin, those are far more comprehensive. Scrum is just focused on one method, which is Scrum itself, as the name says. So like I said, pick and choose whatever works best for you. If you're looking for a much more comprehensive course, you can take the the Agile Scrum Master or the PMI ICP. If you're just looking at bettering your understanding of Scrum, then a certified Scrum Master may be a good course for you to take.
Excellent. Let me ask you more on a personal level, because this question I see all the time in these, and I see like 50 different variations of it when they come in and we ask, hey, if you have a project and you have to adhere to strict delivery date, and then you get to the end and all of a sudden your detailed requirements along the way reveal much greater complexity. And of course, none of us have ever had that problem working with small businesses where they want it out tomorrow, and it turns out that what they're asking for is just really complicated when you get to the details. Could you relay like a personal experience on that, where you had to deal with that in the communication and team team building or whatever connected to that? What happens when you run into that wall where they're saying we need this out and we have this strict guideline, time has to be set? How do you work with that?
Sure. Okay. And this is a very interesting question, and I'm very glad somebody basically touched upon this. And this is reality today. Now, here's the thing. If you were to imagine, two axes, the x-axis and the y-axis, please imagine the certainty of requirements on the x-axis and the certainty of technology on the y-axis. Right? If you do that, I think it's easier to picture this. If your level of change in both the functionality that you have to build and technology that you have to work using, if they are not going to change too much, and if you know rock solid both the requirements and the technology, then you're obviously in the bottom left quadrant, right, close to the x and y axis. In which case, you do not need to follow Agile, right? So because you know rock solid, things are not going to change. The requirements are clearly laid out. The technology is not going to change. In which case, you do not need to. That said, there will still be an advantage of following Agile, right? But it's not mandatory. The advantage is that every 2 weeks, we get to showcase what it is that we thought the customer wanted, get their feedback, and then make corrections along the way. That's one. If I'll take to the extreme right axis in the interest of time. If you look, if you look at a 45 degrees angle, both your technology is variant, is likely to change, and your requirements are likely to change, which means that you're on the top right corner. And that's the other extreme, and that's the extreme where you absolutely want to follow Agile, because you have no idea if you are heading in the right direction. So you want to basically inspect and adapt every few opportunities that you get. Now, And obviously, either if either requirements or the technology is uncertain, it still makes a lot of sense, but it makes most sense, and it's absolutely mandatory for you to follow Agile. Now that said, if somebody complicated the question further by saying, how do you ensure that you do, how do you ensure that you do fixed time projects and also meet the all of the customers' requirements that way if you're following Agile. So in Agile, we basically say that we have X, your cost is pretty much the constant. So that's a good thing. Why? Because we say we have X number of developers in the team, and the cost per sprint for these developers is Y. You want us to work on 5 sprints, we will basically, here's your cost. Cost per sprint is X. So if you want us to work for the next 10 weeks, which is 5 sprints, then the cost is 5X. If you want us to work for the next 10 sprints, then the cost is 10X. At the end of every 2 weeks, we will come back to you, dear customer, and you can change the requirements the way you would like us to change. Now, this probably gives the supplier more flexibility, and I think it's in the best interest of the customer as well to give us this, to work on an agile engagement, because they will be sure that they are getting what they want for the price that they are paying us, right? In an agile, a kind of an environment, we do not, I think it is not the best thing to basically lock in scope and schedule, right? And if push comes to shove, there are still customers who say that you have to do both of them. Then obviously you will do something called release planning, which basically gives us a fantastic opportunity to skip through and basically kind of get an overview of all of the requirements that we are likely to undertake over the next release. Give a get the opportunity to ask questions to the product owner, and only make commitments for the most viable product and the parts that are most valuable to the customer. So now, in a nutshell, which methodology should you follow? Depends. Agile is far more successful. There are trends that I showed you in software development. So Agile is always, the mainstream method. I've given you examples of Salesforce, Amazon, Google. They're all trying Google and are getting great success. Number one. When your requirements or technology, if either of these are likely to change or both of these are likely to change, Agile will give you the advantage and the opportunities to inspect and adapt far more frequently. How do you do team building? And there were other questions related to that. I mean, obviously, given that as opposed to the conventional methods, Agile basically has a strong emphasis on physically seating as many people as possible in close proximity. They have linear seating. They sync up every single day. They do they do follow practices like collective code ownership and such. I think these are fantastic work related opportunities for the team to bond. But even if you are separated physically, if you're basically working out of different geographies, there are tools that are used very efficiently, and given that the sync up happens almost every day, the teams tend to bond. Once the teams bond well and their morale is high, they obviously tend to deliver far better. They seem far more engaged. And so there could be other related questions, but we couldn't get to those parts of the questions. But I hope this answers your question about the choice of the methodology that needs to be taken up, when something should be taken up, and how to work with distributed teams.
Thank you. Do you have time? I went ahead and returned control to your screen if you have anything you want to switch to, and we can go a little bit. We are a little bit over, but it's okay to go another 5 minutes if that's okay, and take a few more questions.
Sure.
And I want to go ahead and say you're welcome to Ayman. I hope I'm saying their name correctly. And then also TJ Emerson. TJ said, thanks for the affirmation that my team is on the right path. We started our agile transformation in January, and it's good to hear we are on track. I always have good
Excellent.
feedback like that coming in. We get people from all walks of life. It always amazes me. We have people who are starting a career, and we have people who have like years of experience, who just want to know a little bit more moving forward. Just quite an array of people come here.
Sure.
We have from Rajiv, Agile embraces change, but what if there is a change to be included which requires expert resources from the same project who are already locked in for existing sprint work in the project? Can Agile handle this effectively? Um, does that make sense? I'm hoping that question makes sense for you.
Sure. So I'll paraphrase the question, and since you're reading it, I'll paraphrase it so just so that I get this right. I think the situation is such that there's a Scrum team, let's call this Alpha, and these guys are working on a sprint. While this team is, while everybody is fully working to their fullest capacity, the customer comes up with, or the product owner comes up and says, here's another bunch of requirements. And obviously this team has to drop what they're doing. Even if they drop what they're doing, they are not the experts, so if you will. They will need another set of experts to basically chip in and help. How do you manage this situation, right? So, Richard, is that your understanding too of the question?
I believe so. Yes, I think
Okay.
that was
All right.
how I kind of understand it.
Yeah, if that is the situation, so there's two roles who obviously play an important role here. Number one, this requirement, obviously we can only honor any changes to the requirements once the sprint ends. So obviously, as as somebody who has to, push back on these requirements or basically say wait till we begin the next sprint, it has to be the product owner. The product owner is the one who works closely with the Scrum Master, right? If taking up new work is going to impede the team's progress, then obviously the Scrum Master gets engaged. So the Scrum Master and the product owner try and have this conversation. They may bring this up, in one of their grooming meetings to say, hey, here's the new set of requirements that the customer wants us to work on, right? The team will obviously say that that they do not have the skills to be able to work on this, or they need some additional training or coaching or what have you. Now, this is not very uncommon, right? Now, and obviously not fully in our control, right? Obviously, the customer wants something that needs to be worked upon. Now, here's what we can do. While the external environment is not in our control, the internal environment is. We can do one of two things. In the upcoming sprint, we basically add another Scrum team, if that is available in the organization, to basically work alongside of this team, who have the skills that are required to basically work on the new work that's come up. Either that is an option, or B, postpone or basically schedule this work for a later time, if that can wait, so that this team can basically upskill themselves and acquire the skills required to to start working on this. But I think given that somebody mentioned that this requires expert resources, expertise is not something that this team can acquire over the next a week or 2 weeks or so. So time is what will determine which way we go. If we have the luxury of time, then we basically let this requirement sit there in the product backlog till the team acquires sufficient level of expertise, and they take up one story at a time, and then basically once somebody gains that expertise, they pick it up. If we have the liberty of time. If we don't, then we switch to the other option, which is to supplement this team with another Scrum team, and who will basically pick this up, so that there isn't an interruption in that service available. Third approach could be a midway, where if we have the resources available in the organization who can help, and if we only have a few resources, like 3 or 4 resources who can help, then seeding this Scrum team with those resources to upskill these individuals so that together they can pick these things up is an option.
Okay.
However, that said, the the third obviously comes with the risk that when you add new individuals to a project, it will slow down the entire team because they do not necessarily have all of the business and the project context. So they will take a while. They will obviously ask a lot of questions, and in totality may slow down the team a little bit, but in the long run they'll pick it up. So I hope that answers your question. And like I said, the amount of time we have in hand is what will determine which of these approaches we will take. And I have seen, all of these approaches work in ERP implementations that have followed agile methodologies at large, financial and insurance companies where there were insurance plans that were to be rolled out ahead of their competition. So these situations do come up from time to time. And obviously some organizations like insurance giants or for that matter financial services companies want to basically introduce some of the cutting edge technology to figure out how can they do next best action marketing for the customers by harvesting social media and all of the big data. So these were requirements which are niche, which weren't there in the beginning of the project but came in midway. So depending on how much, like I said, depending on how much time you have in hand, you pick up one of these approaches. Either do it yourself at a sustainable pace gradually over the next few sprints. You basically supplement this team with another expert team, or basically do the seeding approach, which is to get just a few experts embedded into this team. So hopefully that answers the question.
Excellent. I thought that was that definitely covered a lot of ground. Of course, I'm not an expert, so I might be missing something myself. Like I said, I always learn something new on these webinars.
Sure.
Let's. I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions off of here.
Sure.
So let me go ahead with that. One that I got a couple people asking different variations on is how can we improve the team performance in Scrum teams? Oops. How can we
Sure.
improve the team performance? What can we do to get our team up and running?
Sure. Okay. I think somebody asked this question. So I think there isn't a quick recipe to do this, but I think there are a few ingredients that I can tell you that go in the recipe. I can't tell you the whole recipe in itself because it's a this is both an art and science, and there's multiple things that need to be tried out. However, that said, the things that motivate or basically improve productivity are the following. Number one, does the team understand why they are doing what they are doing, which is nothing but sharing the vision or sharing the big picture. And so this requires support mainly from the product owner or the product manager. Now, there's a difference between saying, can you build me a screen which has a user ID, password, and a submit button, and then show me when when you've gotten anywhere, and then I'll give you feedback and we can work iteratively. There's a difference between that and the other approach, which is to say, hey, we're basically trying to build the next e-commerce app, mobile application. I'd really like you to understand that this is a feature which is gonna basically, or we want to basically embark on this project, and this is gonna be helping us increase our revenues, greatly from $600 million today to $2 billion tomorrow. That's you have the opportunity to make that impact. This feature obviously will help, and it will be a starting point, will be our gateway to getting customers who will help us achieve that business objective that we have. So the product or the project objective is to build the login screen, have a few features like check-in, check-out, a payment gateway, discounts, and so on and so forth. Now imagine sharing this big picture and how individuals will feel so much a part of the game rather than just being treated like robots to say, hey, can you build me a screen which has user ID, password. That's that's not very helpful. Now Sharing the vision, sharing the big picture is one thing that the teams get. Number two, what else motivates teams is obviously the sense of autonomy and the encouragement to get mastery. And sense of autonomy is to say that this is a self-managed, self-empowering team. There are obviously things that people managers need to do to help create self-organizing teams. And once we say, these are self-organizing teams, then these are teams that own the code together, that help each other out, that basically, will basically constantly work on delivering value, will do peer reviews, developer becomes QA depending on the situation, and vice versa. So the second ingredient is to build or help build self-organizing teams, right? And once you build self-organizing teams, something almost magical happens, which is that the teams start to make the team level decisions on their own. They only go to the senior management when they have to make decisions which have an economy of scale impact, which have a huge financial impact, right? So just imagine how great it would be if the teams can make decisions like, A, if they worked on 2 stories in the previous sprint, those 2 stories, or one story is completely accepted, the other story has a few bugs reported in it. The product owner basically is ready in the next sprint. He's given another couple of stories to the team. Does the team even need to ask the vice president of engineering whether they should fix these bugs first, or if that's a priority, or should they basically pick up new features and functionality, and they're not going to release this anytime soon. So is it okay to defer those bugs till like another couple of sprints and they can fix it later? This is a decision that the team needs to make by themselves. They need to understand that, and basically internalize the fact that because they worked on the first couple of stories, they obviously must have been the highest valuable stories. They're better off getting those done before they can move up to other stories. So the team needs to do all that they can in making recommendations and owning it. Other things like, should the team actually invest time in automating the test cases for the first couple of stories that they did? Is this a question that they should ask to the director of engineering or the VP of engineering? It makes no sense. The team needs to understand the the benefit and the fact that having a robust automation framework is just like having a very solid backbone. You cannot you cannot be fearless when you're trying to check in a new piece of code unless you have a robust automation framework which will basically catch and throw errors right away and tell you whether it's safe or unsafe to basically take up or merge new code, right? So that is the second ingredient. A, externally, product owner, product manager sharing the vision, and B, the teams becoming self-organizing. Uh, XP values, or extreme programming values, is the third ingredient, and I'll stop here. The third ingredient: most Scrum teams that follow Scrum or Agile should be also following extreme programming practices. Of course, the team's morale and the team's productivity can only be higher if the team's productivity is higher. XP, or extreme programming practices, have proven to be extremely successfully contributing to the quality of software. And so that would be my very strong recommendations. Things like pair programming, test-driven development. These are some practices which improve productivity, quality, and the confidence of the team to release code. So those are a few things that I would suggest. And needless to say, the team should very, very strongly embrace the basic tenets of Agile, which is to be transparent transparent in showcasing your progress through your burn down charts or your Kanban boards. always be willing to inspect and always be willing to make adaptations to your processes from time to time, and be open to learning new ways. So those would be other ingredients in the recipe. So sharing the vision, building self-organizing team, extreme programming practices are three things that I would very strongly suggest, besides continuing to live the agile values of transparency, inspection, and adaptation.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Krishna.
Sure.
We unfortunately can only extend it so far, so we do need to go ahead and close this session. Again, Krishna, thank you for being here today. We had a lot of thanks on the chat window. So from Rajiv, who was thanking you, and there's a number of other people. I think I already closed them out.
Awesome.
Sulabh, Aparna, thanks a lot. Nice webinar. Thanks for the answer. So just some wonderful feedback. I always like to make sure you hear that, since you do take time out of your day to come join us and do these webinars.
Sure, absolutely. And I must say, I'm very grateful for people to taking the time off. I don't know which part of the world they're joining us from, but I think this is a work day, so I really appreciate everybody taking the time out, joining, and I really enjoyed answering these questions. So thank you very much for asking these questions. It gives me an opportunity to think and satiate my sense of or my desire to be a coach. So thank you very much.
Excellent. And thank everybody for being here. I look forward to seeing you in our classrooms at Simplilearn. You certainly can go to our forums and ask additional questions. We do have open community forums at simplilearn.com. I think it's /community, but you can go to the main page and you'll see community. If you have any additional questions, you can certainly ask them there, and there's also a great place if you have questions on the certification programs too. Krishna, I'm going to go ahead and close the session. If you want to say one last goodbye before we shut down.
All right, sure. Goodbye and gracias. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I love that. Gracias. Everybody take care and have a wonderful day or evening.